At Thanksgiving dinner, my whole family turned their chairs away from me. I finally found out why. The smell of roasted turkey, warm bread, and spiced apples filled the air as I walked into my daughter's house that evening. It was the first time in months we were all under the same roof. I'd spent the morning carefully pressing my shirt and polishing my shoes, wanting to look presentable. Thanksgiving was always special for me, not just for the food, but for the feeling of family. I'm 65 now, and after losing my wife, Linda, a few years back, these gatherings have meant more than ever. My daughter, Emily, greeted me at the door with a polite smile, but there was a stiffness in her hug. I noticed it instantly. It wasn't the warm, lingering embrace she used to give. Her husband Tom appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hey George," he said, using my first name instead of Dad as he always used to. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was just imagining things. But then I stepped into the dining room. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, plates arranged with care, and silverware gleaming. Yet as I approached my seat, I noticed something odd. The chairs, almost all of them, were angled away from me. It wasn't blatant, but enough that when people sat down, they'd have to turn their heads if they wanted to look at me. I tried to laugh it off internally. Maybe it was just how the table was arranged, but then my son, Mark, walked in. His wife Sarah right behind him. Mark barely made eye contact. Sarah avoided it entirely. My sister-in-law Nancy mumbled a quick hi and busied herself with rearranging napkins. It felt like I had stepped into a room where someone had been talking about me and I'd just caught the tail end of it. Dinner began, and conversation flowed, but not toward me. They talked to each other, laughed at jokes I couldn't quite hear, and passed dishes without even glancing in my direction. I tried to join in. "So, Mark, how's work been?" He nodded briefly. "Fine," then turned back to Tom to continue whatever they had been discussing. The turkey was juicy, the mashed potatoes creamy, the cranberry sauce perfectly tart, but everything tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror. Same face, same silver hair, same deep lines around the eyes, from years of smiling, worrying, and living. But tonight, my reflection looked more like a stranger. I splashed water on my face, took a deep breath, and went back. When I returned, I caught something. Emily had leaned toward Nancy, whispering. Nancy's eyes flicked toward me, then quickly back to Emily. It wasn't my imagination. Something was going on. The laughter returned the moment I sat back down, but it was subdued when directed anywhere near me. I forced a smile, told myself to just get through dinner and maybe later I could talk to Emily alone. After dessert, people began migrating to the living room. I followed, trying to catch Emily's attention, but she kept busy clearing plates, checking on the kids, adjusting the TV volume. At one point, I stood near the fireplace, looking at the framed photos on the mantel. There was one of me and Linda from years ago, a summer barbecue, her arm around my waist, my hand holding hers. The frame was slightly dusty, as if no one had touched it in a while. Finally, I managed to catch Emily in the hallway. I said quietly, "Is something wrong? Have I done something?" She hesitated, biting her lip. Her eyes darted toward the living room, where the rest of the family sat. "Dad, now's not the time," she whispered. That hurt more than I expected. "Then when is the time?" I asked. She sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "We'll talk later." Later never came. Instead, I sat in the corner of the living room, listening to them share stories, all while the invisible wall between us grew taller. Mark sat beside Sarah, their shoulders touching, whispering now and then, followed by quiet chuckles. Every time I caught their eyes, they looked away. The kids, my grandkids, were playing on the floor, but even they seemed hesitant to approach me. I'd reach out to ruffle someone's hair, and they'd scamper off toward their parents. I felt like I was watching my own family from behind glass. Hours passed like that. Eventually, coats were fetched, hugs exchanged, though mine was short and stiff, and people began leaving. Emily walked me to the door. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Drive safe, Dad," she said softly. "Good night, Em," I replied. On the drive home, my chest felt heavy. I replayed the evening over and over, searching for clues. What had I done? Had I said something in the past without realizing it? Was there some misunderstanding I didn't know about? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was no closer to an answer. I turned off the engine and just sat there, listening to the ticking of the cooling car. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I thought about calling Emily right then, but it was late. And maybe, just maybe, she'd reach out first, but she died in single quotes. Days passed. No calls, no texts. When I finally mustered the courage to phone her, she let it go to voicemail. I left a message. Simple, careful. "Hi Em, it's Dad. I just wanted to see how you're doing. Give me a call when you can." Another week went by. Nothing. I tried Mark. Same thing. The silence was louder than any argument could have been. Then one afternoon, as I was sorting through mail at my kitchen table, a letter caught my eye. The handwriting was familiar. It was from Nancy. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. Inside, a short note, just a few sentences, enough to make my breath catch. She wrote that she thought I deserved to know the truth, And that truth, she hinted, was the reason they had all turned their chairs away from me on Thanksgiving. My hands shook as I read the last line. She wrote, "I can't be the one to tell you everything, but it's about Linda and something that came to light after she passed." I stared at those words until they blurred. My heart pounded. I pushed back my chair and stood, feeling unsteady. What could she possibly mean? And why had my family kept it from me? The letter slipped from my hand onto the table outside. The sky was turning the color of ashdot. The house felt colder somehow. I sat back down, the weight of the mystery pressing on my chest. Somewhere out there was an answer, but part of me was terrified to find out what it was. I sat there for a long time, staring at that letter as if the paper itself might suddenly explain everything. The quiet in the kitchen felt heavier now, like even the air was waiting for me to make a move. I picked up the letter again, rereading each word slowly. About Linda, something that came to light after she passed. My mind went in 100 directions at once, each possibility worse than the last. Was it about her health? Had she hidden something from me? Or was it something about our marriage? Something I had never seen coming. I tried to tell myself not to jump to conclusions, but the truth was already gnawing at me. Nancy's choice of words wasn't casual. The fact she hadn't written it out completely told me she was afraid, or maybe she thought it wasn't her place to be the one to break it. Either way, I knew this wasn't something small. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I kept moving from room to room without really knowing why. I'd pick up a book, read the same sentence 3 times and set it down. I'd open the fridge, stare inside, and close it again. When night fell, I couldn't bring myself to turn on the TV. Instead, I sat in my recliner, the letter on the coffee table in front of me, the ticking of the old clock filling the room. Memories of Linda played in my head. Her laugh, the way she used to hum in the kitchen, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. We'd had our ups and downs like any couple, but I'd always believed we were solid. Now I wasn't sure of anything by morning. I knew I couldn't just sit here waiting for answers to fall into my lap. Nancy had opened the door. Even if just a crack, I had to walk through it. I called her, my hand trembling slightly as I held the phone. She answered on the 3rd ring. "George," she said, her voice cautious. "Nancy," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. "I got your letter." Silence. Then she exhaled. "I figured you might call. What's going on?" I asked. "I told you," she said slowly. "It's about Linda, but I'm not the one who should tell you. It needs to come from Emily or Mark." My jaw tightened. "They won't talk to me." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I sent the letter. But George, once you know, things won't go back to how they were." I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Things are already not how they were. There was another long pause. Then Nancy spoke again. "Go see Emily today. Don't call first, just go. She won't turn you away if you're standing right there." I didn't ask how she knew that. I just thanked her and hung up. I didn't even change clothes. I grabbed my coat, the letter, and my car keys, and headed out. The drive to Emily's was shorter than I wanted it to be. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat the whole way there. When I pulled into her driveway, I noticed Tom's truck parked out front. For a moment, I considered turning around, but I'd been turning away from hard things my whole life, and where had that gotten me now? I walked up to the door and knocked. It took a minute before Emily opened it. Her expression shifted from surprise to unease the moment she saw me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said. "Please." She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder, then stepped aside to let me in. Tom was in the living room, holding a mug of coffee. He didn't say hello. We sat down at the kitchen table. I placed the letter on the table between us. "Your aunt sent me this," I said. "She said it's about your mother. She said you'd explain." Emily's face went pale. Tom set his mug down a little too hard. "Dad," Emily began, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't want it to come out like this." "Come out," I repeated. "So there is something." She looked at Tom, who gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. "Tell me," I said, my voice firmer now. "Whatever it is, I have the right to know." Emily's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "After Mum died, I was going through her things. I found letters." "What kind of letters?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "From someone. A man. They weren't just friendly letters." I stared at her, the words struggling to sink in. "What are you saying?" I think Mum was having an affair." "Dad." The words landed like a blow. I felt my hands go cold. Tom shifted uncomfortably, but I couldn't look away from Emily. "No," I said finally. "That's not possible. Linda, she wouldn't." "I didn't believe it either," Emily said, quickly at first, but then I found photographs and emails. They went back years. My chest tightened. "Years." She nodded. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as if it might offer some escape. Everything in the room felt sharper somehow. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the chair, the faint scent of coffee. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" I asked. "Because I didn't want to hurt you," Emily said. "But other people knew. Nancy, even Mark, and once we all knew it, changed things. We didn't know how to look at you without thinking about it." I blinked at her. "Look at me. Why, I didn't do anything." "I know," she said softly, "but it was like the whole image of our family was different. and you didn't know, and we all did. It made things strange. I couldn't tell if I wanted to shout or just walk out. I thought of all the years Linda and I had spent together, the vacations, the late-night talks, the quiet mornings. Were they all tainted now? I pushed my chair back and stood. I need air, I said. Emily didn't try to stop me. I stepped outside into the cold afternoon, my breath coming out in visible clouds. The neighborhood was quiet, but in my head it was chaos, an affair. For years I thought of Linda's smile, her hand in mine, and now those same moments replayed with an ugly shadow over them. I walked down the driveway, not sure where I was going. The truth was, I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to go back in time, to before I knew, but that wasn't possible after a while. I got back in my car. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly past places. Linda and I used to go to the park, the little diner on Maple Street, the bookstore where she'd spend hours browsing. Each place felt different now, as if a layer had been peeled back and I could see something darker beneath. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, the house looked foreign to me. Inside, I sat down in the living room without turning on the lights. The letter from Nancy was still on the coffee table where I'd left it. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew this: the truth wasn't done with me yet. Somewhere there was more to this story, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear it, or if I could survive it when I did. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down on me. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the window felt louder than usual. The thought kept circling in my head. Linda had been unfaithful. Not just once, but for years, and all that time, I never saw it. I tried to piece together moments from our life, wondering if there had been signs I'd missed. The occasional late nights, when she said she was working late at the community center, the sudden trips to see an old friend out of town, the times she seemed distracted at dinner. I had trusted her completely. Maybe I'd been a fool that around 3 in the morning, I got up and made myself a cup of tea. The steam curled up in the dim kitchen light, and I just sat there, hands wrapped around the mug, not drinking, felt hollow. In the silence, my mind kept drifting back to Emily's face when she told me she had looked torn apart herself. But there had also been something else there. Guilt, not guilt for what Linda had done, but guilt for keeping it from me, and maybe for how they'd treated me on Thanksgiving the next morning. I decided I couldn't just let the conversation with Emily be the end of it. I needed to know more. If she had letters and photographs, I needed to see them. I drove back to her house without calling. When she opened the door, she looked startled. "Dad, what are you doing here again?" "I need to see them," I said plainly. Her brow furrowed. "See what? The letters, the photographs, whatever it is you found. I can't live with just half the truth." She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "Tom's at work," she said finally. "Come in." The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the heater. She led me upstairs to a small storage room. In the corner was a plastic storage bin, the kind we used to keep holiday decorations in. She knelt down, pulled it toward her, and opened it. Inside was a manila envelope. She handed it to me without saying anything. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first thing I saw was a stack of letters, each in an unfamiliar handwriting. The dates on them went back over 15 years. The tone in the first letter I read was unmistakable, intimate, tender, laced with longing. They weren't from a colleague or an old friend. They were from someone who loved her. And by the way, she had written back because, yes, there were copies of her replies. She had loved him too. I could barely breathe. The photographs came next. Some were innocuous: Linda and a man I didn't recognize, smiling in what looked like a park. Others were more damning: her hand in his, her head resting on his shoulder. One showed them sitting together in a small cafe, leaning in close over a shared dessert. My stomach turned. The man appeared in all of them: dark hair, kind of wiry build, maybe a few years younger than me. I had no idea who he was. "Do you know his name?" I asked. Emily nodded reluctantly. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel Harper." The name meant nothing to me. "Did Mom ever bring him here?" "To the house?" Emily shook her head quickly. "Not that I know of. I think she kept that part of her life very separate." Separate, that word cut deeper than I expected. It meant she had built a whole part of her world that didn't include me. I set the photographs down and rubbed my hands over my face. "Why didn't you destroy them?" I asked. "I couldn't," Emily said softly. It felt wrong, like erasing the truth. I didn't respond. I put everything back into the envelope, stood and handed it to her. "Keep it," I said. "I can't. Not yet." She looked like she wanted to say more, but I was already walking toward the door. On the drive home, I kept saying his name in my head. Daniel Harper. Who was he? Where was he now? And did he know that Linda had died? By the time I got home, if he cited something, if I wanted answers, I'd have to find him. I wasn't sure what I'd say if I did, but I knew I couldn't rest until I looked him in the eye. I went into my study and sat at my desk. I hadn't used the computer much lately, but I turned it on and opened the browser. I typed his name into the search bar. There were dozens of results, too many to sort through at first. I added the name of our town to narrow it down. Then I found something. An old local newspaper. Article about a charity event. There was a photograph. It was him standing beside a woman who was not Linda. The caption read, Daniel Harper and his wife Claire at the annual community fundraiser. Wife. So he had been married during all of this. That realization twisted the knife even deeper. I clicked on his name in the article, which led to another piece, this one about his work. He ran a small accounting firm in a neighboring town. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. I had his workplace. I could walk in there tomorrow if I wanted to, but should I? Part of me wanted to march in and demand every detail. Another part feared what hearing it from him would do to me that night. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I hadn't done in years. I sat in the living room, the amber liquid catching the light. The silence felt heavier than ever. When Linda died, I thought the grief would be the hardest part of the rest of my life. But now I realized there was something worse, finding out that the life I thought we shared might have been a lie. I didn't know if confronting Daniel would give me peace or break me further. But I knew this. Doing nothing wasn't an option. Somewhere out there was a man who knew a version of Linda I never met, and I had to meet him. The next morning I woke up with a decision already forming in my mind. I didn't remember dreaming, but it felt like my thoughts had been turning over in the background all night. The name, the face, the photographs, they were all tangled in my head, refusing to let me rest. Daniel Harper. I was going to see him. I didn't tell Emily. I didn't tell anyone. It felt like something I had to do alone, without interference or warnings. After breakfast I put on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and set out. The drive to the neighboring town took just under an hour. The winter morning was gray, the sky hanging low and heavy. My hands stayed tight on the steering wheel the entire way. When I pulled up outside the address listed for his accounting firm, I just sat there for a few minutes. The building was small, with a neat little sign that read Harper and Associates in dark blue lettering. There were no other customers going in or out. Through the glass door, I could see a reception desk and a row of chairs against the wall. I could also see him. He was standing behind the desk, talking to a young woman who was probably his receptionist. He looked older than in the photographs I'd seen, but not by much. The dark hair had more gray in it now. Same wiry build. I sat there, watching, feeling my pulse quicken. Part of me wanted to get out of the car immediately, but another part was frozen. I thought of Linda. I thought of the life we'd built, the memories we'd shared, the nights we'd lain side by side in silence, not knowing she was sharing herself somewhere else too. Finally, I pushed the door open and stepped out. The cold air bit at my face as I crossed the short distance to the entrance. The receptionist looked up first when I walked in. "Good morning," she said politely. Daniel turned his head, his eyes landing on me for a second. His expression didn't change. Then something flickered there, recognition. It was brief, but I saw it. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice steady, but guarded. I didn't sit down. "You know who I am," I said. He didn't answer right away. The receptionist glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Could you give us a minute, Jenna?" he said without looking at her. She hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into a back office. Daniel came out from behind the desk, motioning toward a small meeting room off to the side. We stepped inside, and he closed the door. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. We sat across from each other at a small table up close. I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his hands fidgeted slightly as they rested on the tabletop. "Why are you here, George?" he asked quietly. "You know why," I replied. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Emily told you." "She told me enough," I said. "But I want to hear it from you. I want to know what you were to her." His eyes flicked away for a moment before returning to mine. I met Linda at a charity event," he said. "We talked that night, and we kept talking. It wasn't supposed to be anything, but it became something." Something. My voice was sharper than I intended. "We cared about each other," he said. "More than we should have. We both knew it was wrong. And yet you kept going," I said. He didn't deny it. "For how long?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, 15 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 15 years. Almost a quarter of my life. "Did she love you?" I asked. His gaze didn't waver. "Yes." I gripped the edge of the table. "And your wife? Did she?" "No." He shook his head. "No, not until later." "Later?" I pressed. "After Linda died," he said softly. "I told her everything." "Everything," I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. There was a long silence between us. I searched his face for some sign of regret, guilt, anything that might make this feel less like a clean cut through the life I thought I had. "Why are you telling me this so easily?" I asked finally. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said. "And because there's nothing left to hide." I wanted to shout at him, to tell him he'd stolen years from me, that he'd taken something from Linda I could never get back. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood. "We're done here," I said. He didn't try to stop me when I stepped outside. The cold felt sharper. I walked back to my car, sat inside, and just stared at the steering wheel. 15 years she had loved him, and somehow she had still come home to me every night, as if nothing was different. The drive back was a blur. I didn't remember the turns, the lights, the passing cars. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked even emptier than before. Inside, I wandered from room to room, the living room where we used to watch movies, the kitchen where she'd stand making tea, humming under her breath, our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the space where she used to sleep. I tried to remember the last time I'd told her I loved her. Had she meant it back when she said it to me? The questions kept piling up, heavier and heavier that night. I couldn't bring myself to eat dinner. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, staring at the empty chair across from me. Somewhere in the quiet I realized that knowing the truth hadn't given me closure, it had only opened a bigger wound, and worse, there was still something missing. Daniel had told me how it started, and how long it lasted, but he hadn't told me why she had stayed with me all those years, while giving part of herself to someone else. And that answer was the one I needed most. The rain didn't stop that night. I barely slept every time I closed my eyes. I saw her face, those same eyes I'd seen decades ago, looking at me from across the station platform. Only now they belonged to someone else. Someone who seemed to know far too much. By the time morning light crept through my window, pale and uncertain, I had already decided I wouldn't take the necklace with me. It lay on the table, coiled like a question I still couldn't answer. Instead, I slipped the photograph into my coat pocket, a reminder. Proof. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement and wood smoke from somewhere nearby. The walk to the cafe felt longer than yesterday. Every street seemed to hold its breath, as if it knew something was about to change. The bell over the cafe door chimed when I entered. She was already there, sitting in the far corner, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her. Her eyes found mine immediately, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she gestured for me to join her. I slid into the seat opposite her. "You came," she said. "You told me to," I replied. A faint smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Inside were letters all yellowed, the ink faded in places, all of them addressed to me. But none had ever reached my door. I picked one up, my hands trembling. The handwriting was unmistakable. Laura's. The first letter began simply, "I'm sorry I left without explaining." My throat tightened as I read. She'd written about the city, about trying to start fresh, about someone watching her. She said she'd planned to come back, but things had gotten dangerous, that she couldn't risk leading them to me. The last letter in the folder was dated 3 years ago. It ended with a promise: "If I make it out of this, I'll find you." I looked up at the woman. "Where did you get these?" She hesitated. "She asked me to keep them safe. Said if anything happened to her, I should find you." Her voice softened. "She was my mother." The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd imagined every version of what might have happened to Laura. I never imagined she'd had a daughter. She never told me. I said quietly, "She said it was better that way." The woman replied, "She didn't want you pulled into her problems." I leaned back, staring at the letters. "She's gone, isn't she?" The woman's silence was answer enough. I closed my eyes. The cafe noises faded, the clink of cups, the low hum of conversation, until there was only the sound of my own breath. When I opened them again, she was watching me. "There's more you need to know," she said. She told me about the man in the dark coat, the one I'd seen at the station. He'd been a friend once, then something else entirely. A man with debts, the kind that drew dangerous people. Laura had tried to help him, and it had cost her more than she could pay. "Why tell me now?" I asked. "Because you're the only one who still cares enough to understand," she said, "and because there's something of hers that doesn't belong with me." From her bag, she pulled a small box. Inside was a gold ring, worn and warm. "From years of being carried, she wanted you to have it," she said. I turned the ring over in my hand, feeling the faint engraving on the inside. It was a single word: always. I slipped it into my pocket next to the photograph. We talked for another hour, not about the danger or the years of absence, but about Laura, the way she laughed, the way she hummed when she cooked, the way she could quiet a room without raising her voice. Pieces of her, I thought, I'd lost forever. When the woman finally stood to leave, she paused. "I think she wanted you to let go," she said. I watched her walk away, the cafe door closing softly behind her. The letters lay on the table, the edges curling slightly. I gathered them up, tucking them carefully into my coat outside. The rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the afternoon light, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew I'd carry her with me, not just in the necklace or the ring or the letters, in the quiet moments and the choices I made in the spaces where she once stood. I turned toward home, and the world, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel so heavy.